to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. And I got to tell you something, people. The gentleman on my show today, well, as you know, I'm a big fan of the 80s. I graduated high school in the 80s. I graduated college in the 80s. And this gentleman was a huge part. He had a bunch of hits. He played Live Aid. He had one of the coolest videos on MTV, and he's still at it. And he has a tour coming up in Germany, and he has a tour coming up in England later in the year. And my Nick is Nik Kershaw. How you doing, Nick?
Hi, Steve. I'm a good man. How are you?
I'm doing well. So you have the concerts coming up. How do you prepare? It's because you missed that whole. We missed the chunk. You know, when I talked to a lot of musicians, we missed that whole chunk because of COVID. So now you're coming back and you're taking the tour out in Germany. How do you get ready to tour?
Well, I guess I think like everyone else, when COVID stopped, I kind of locked myself away and just made sure I remembered which end of the guitar to hold and the old tunes. And it turns out it is kind of like riding a bike in that you don't forget. It's just a lot of the songs are just ingrained in there. So I guess about 2/3 of the show doesn't need any particular preparation. But yeah, I will be changing the set for these two little tours. So and it will involve playing a couple of songs that I've never played before live and stuff. So yeah, I'll have to get stuck into that and get the band up to speed as well. Yeah.
Does that get you nervous when you play a song you never played? Because I did stand-up comedy for many years, and I just got back into it. I have a few shows coming up, and I did an open mic the other night, and I was nervous. I'm like, I did over 2,500 shows, and I'm trying new stuff because we grow, and we're not going to do stuff. I'm not going to do material I did when I was 24. But do you get nervous, like in your head? You know the crowd's going to like it, but do you sit there and do you get a little intimidated going, I'm playing the song for the first time live. They're going to love the other stuff, but what is it for you like?
Yeah, you do. I mean, I get nervous anyway, even playing walking on stage to play the old tunes. I still get nervous. But the new ones have their own challenges, yeah, in that you're not kind of match fit, if you like, with those songs. You just get used to playing the songs, and it doesn't matter how many times you rehearse them, playing them in front of a crowd in the heat of battle is a completely different thing. So it takes a few shows to get them out of the way and for everybody to get comfortable with it. Yeah, but and sometimes nobody ever gets comfortable with them. Sometimes you just have to go, oh, this one just isn't working. Let's dump it and move on.
Now, when did you start playing music? I believe your father or mother was a flautist.
My father.
Okay, so did you? So I guess you grew up with music around your household. I mean, how was your course of action to be getting into music?
It was always around. My mum was a singer. She sung operatic and lieder stuff. So she was. You know, she'd be cooking the dinner and the Hallelujah chorus would be coming out of the kitchen and stuff like that. So it's always around, but I wasn't that, like any sort of young kid. I'd rather play football and play with my Lego, and then I wasn't really that interested until I was sort of early teens, I guess, when I started discovering my own, music, and that there was music that wasn't actually catered for in my parents' record collection of 5 records.
Well, who are some of your influences? I had an older brother, so he turned me on to some, the classic rock and stuff like that. But who were some of your influences? Because you're in England, I'm over here. We have different influences. Yeah. But who were you listening to? Like who sat there and you went, wow, just oh my God.
Well, it kind of went all over the place, really. I went through various phases to do with fashion and to do with what a particular tribe I was trying to join at the time. But early on, yeah, I guess it was glam rock, and it was. I mean, Bowie was a huge wow moment when I saw him and I heard what he was up to. That would have been the kind of Aladdin Sane kind of time. But then I had various stages I went through. I was a skinhead at one point, so then I was obliged to listen to Slade and a lot of reggae. Then I had my prog phase. Then I had so it was like Genesis and Yes and King Crimson and stuff. And then I kind of went into my then it was before that was probably Deep Purple and Zeppelin and Alice Cooper, and then I kind of got into a jazz fusion band, and it was like Steely Dan and Weather Report, and so. But by the time I kind of started writing in earnest and doing my own thing, I had all that going on, as well as kind of the stuff I played at dinner in some function gigs that we did, sort of Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, you name it, we played it. So it was all in there.
So when do you start sitting there and saying, I'm going to make this my life? I mean, you're playing in bands, but when do you sit there and say, I want to be a musician? Because it's a big thing. Like when I graduated college, I wanted to do comedy. And my parents said, take this class. We'll show you how to get into the business. And I had to work on it. And it's a process. For you, when did you sit there and say, I want to do this? This is what my life calling is.
That would have been the Bowie moment. That would have been when I first saw Bowie, and I would have been about 15, I guess. And a friend of mine had just got a guitar, and I was hanging out at his place and picking up his guitar. And I mean, before that, I still wanted to be the centre of attention. I went through a period of wanting to be an actor, or you know, the usual things of score the winning goal in the FA Cup final, or a racing car driver. You know, but nothing too mundane in it. Just anything that involves showing off, really. And then I thought, well, I can. And then I discovered I could actually do it, and that I had some kind of talent for it. So I thought, wow, this. And I was rubbish at school at anything else. So I thought, the only way I'm going to make anything of myself in life is to pursue this. So yeah, I would have been about 15 years old when I decided I was going to play music and write my own music and do that for a living.
Now, how did you get to that point? When did you start getting into being Nik Kershaw? I mean, you know, it's a matter of, I know you looked in a paper and found a manager, or, I mean, because now everything's on the internet. Like back then, there was actually, people don't understand when you go, you had to send a tape or you had to look at a paper. Now you can just go, oh, I can go to this website and I can learn how to do this. Well, how did you actually break into the music business?
Well, that was quite a long process, as it turned out. Because, I mean, first of all, I was in school bands, then I had sort of my own band that we used to spend a lot of time practicing and going down the pub and trying to think of names for the band and stuff. Then I went through a phase of actually earning a living in a functions band and playing music for a living. And then there was a period of unemployment, shall we say, which is quite a productive period for me because I did a lot of writing and demoing during that period. And then there was the period of making demos and hoiking them around record companies and getting rejection slips. And there was the period of nearly giving up, and then the period of getting lucky and finding a manager and him getting me a deal, right? And that was that. The whole process, I guess, took about 8 years, possibly.
What made you not give up? Like, you know, so many people, they get rejection, and in any kind of entertainment business, it's tough. And it's more rejection than salespeople get. It's brutal because you know your craft is good. What made you at that, when you were sitting there down on your luck, what made you decide, I'm not giving up?
I think it was just youthful kind of bravado, or just a belief that, you know, I'd get rejection slips and I'd read them and I'd go, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. I'm right. I was just absolutely positive that it was going to happen. I mean, right from the age of like 17 or 18 years old, when I flunked out of school, I was completely sure that it was going to happen. I had no doubt in my mind. And it's only when you look back and you realise how lucky you got in the end. But yeah, so it didn't matter how many people were going to tell me that, you know, whether my teachers were telling me I was an idiot and it was never going to amount to anything, or whether it was my record company executives telling me I wasn't commercial enough or whatever. You just took it on the chin and got on with it, because even when I was, you know, struggling to get a deal, there was I thought there was a long way to go before I was going to give up. There was a long road to travel before I was going to finally hang up my boots, you know. So yeah, I just totally believed it was going to happen. And then fortunately I found another, you know, someone else who thought it was going to happen, and then a whole bunch of people that thought it was going to happen, and all of a sudden it happens.
How was that manager? What did that manager? Did you ever talk to him and say what he saw in you, or how did you start the relationship with your first manager that really helped you out?
Yeah, he must have. Obviously, he must have seen. I've never had that conversation in retrospect, to be honest. But that's happened to me with a few people over the years, that they've kind of obviously seen something in me that I'm maybe didn't even see myself. There was a keyboard player called Reg Webb who basically let me into his jazz fusion band because he saw what I was capable of, even though I was struggling every week to try and figure out what the hell everybody else was playing. You know, it was a real kind of, I was right on the edge of my capabilities, but he really stuck with it, and so he was one guy who did it. And then Mickey, my manager, he just turns up. He was already managing 9 Below Zero, so he'd done it for someone else, and I don't know. I don't know what he saw, because I sent him some very basic demos and a pretty dreadful picture of me with not looking even vaguely cool. But he saw something. I don't know what it was, and just a little. To the extent I don't know what it is, what made him answer the advert in the first place, and neither does he, because it was just in the back of Melody Maker, along with all the kind of loon pants and bass player needs work and someone trying to sell a Marshall amp, you know. And there I was, and he just looked at it and had a feeling about the advert, and sent me a letter. How about that? Came in the mail through the postbox.
Isn't that crazy when you think about it? Like, you know, I mean, it just blows my mind how kids have it so much easier now. They just don't get it. It's like, I remember, sending letters. Like, when I moved to LA, I was trying to get agents for screenwriting, and you would send a letter, and you would get the rejection letter, and you put it on your wall and go, I'm gonna do better than this. But now it's just like you get an email and you just delete it.
Yeah, I know. No, to the extent that I remember when I was negotiating my first record deal, and I had to talk to my lawyer. I had to do it from the phone box at the bottom of the road. So it had to be at an appointed time. I just have to stand outside the phone box and wait for the phone to ring, so I could talk to my solicitor. Yeah, it's all pretty.
How did that first record deal come about? How did that first record come? Because the record was a big hit. How did that all come into place for you?
Well, originally, my first deal with MCA was a singles deal, and we went through various little false starts. I went in and recorded a few tracks with a producer called Dan Priest, which they didn't like very much. I actually recorded 2 tracks with Rupert Hine, who was Howard Jones's producer, which I loved, but they didn't. Or MCA, Charlie Air at MCA didn't like.
Real quick, what did you love about him? What did you love about those early?
I don't know. I think because the trouble is, I don't have copies of them. In fact, I was in contact with the engineer from those sessions a few weeks ago, asking if he had a copy of that recording, because I remember loving it so much and being right. This is it. This is fantastic. We're going to do the whole album with Rupert. And then being horribly disappointed when the record company said no. So I can't. It just sounded really classy. That's all I can tell you. It was 2 songs. It was "I Won't Let the Sun Go Down on Me" and a B-side, and I can't remember what the B-side was. But yeah. So that I can't answer that question because I don't remember exactly what it sounded like, and I've got no evidence existing.
Okay, now. So you recorded with Rupert, and they say no go. So then what happened?
Yeah. So then they suggested Peter Collins, and I didn't know much about Peter at all, other than he'd produced a #1 hit for Musical Youth. That's Pass the Dutchie, which I thought, okay, well, that's not really what I do, but all right, let's. But then I found sort of other stuff that he'd done, and I thought, well, this is really good. So we had a chat, and we got on really well, and I don't ever remember there being a kind of much of a conversation about it. It was kind of, oh, you're going to produce my album, and let's go. And it was, the whole process was Peter is very very organised, incredibly organised, and you'll go into the studio at 11 o'clock in the morning, and you'll come out at 8 o'clock at night, and that's it. He doesn't, with no exceptions. There was one exception, which I might tell you about later, but and then you worked from that time. You had lunch at this time, and most of the process was me just re-recording the demos and the things that I played on the demo. And basically, if we got stuck or there's something I couldn't play, then Peter got his Filofax out and looked at his telephone numbers and said, "Well, what about Wix Wickens on keyboards? Let's get him in to do a bit of programming and a bit of playing and just gradually got people in. Charlie Morgan on drums." And it was just a really kind of matter of fact process, the whole thing. And I think the first album took about 10 weeks, I guess. That's a week per track, finished and mixed, which is quite extraordinary, really. I wish I could do that now. But it takes me years to produce anything.
So the album gets done. When do you first hear yourself on the radio? Do you remember after the album? Was it a while or when? Because I always think for an artist that must be a great feeling that you put on the radio and you're coming out of it. Do you remember when you first heard yourself on the radio?
Yes, I do, and it wasn't the first single either. The first single was "I Won't Let the Sun Go Down on Me," and it did okay, and it got me my name around the industry, and I did a little tour of radio stations and stuff like that, and it was being played on the radio because I was there when they were playing it. But actually, being caught unawares out in public somewhere, and my song coming on the radio, that was "Wouldn't It Be Good" in the January of 1984 when I was sitting in a cab in London. Just driving along, and Radio 1 was on in this cab, and "Wouldn't It Be Good" came on, and I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Did you tell the driver, "That's me, that's me"?
No, you got to be careful getting into conversation with London cab drivers, because you don't know where it's going to lead.
So you have the album starts taking off. Now, the video, and I'm an MTV guy. I remember when MTV came out. Wouldn't it be good, the video? You got to tell me about that video, because that suit, it was different. I mean, and back then I had hair too. Back then we all had that 80s hair, But what do you take away from the video? Because the video really helped. Video helped so many people break in America that we weren't too familiar with, because MTV, you would sit there and when I was in college when that came out, we'd come back from partying and we'd watch MTV. What was your take on making that video? Was it a pain in the ass to you, or was it something you liked? Because it's a long day. People who've never been involved.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's in the trailer. But tell me about the video, and did you have any idea with the concept in that suit that you were an alien, I guess? It was a crazy video.
Yeah, it was all very early days for me. So having that kind of attention lavished on me, and all these people running about, and lighting technicians and makeup artists and set designers and whatever, I loved it. Yeah, it was me being the centre of attention again. But yeah, what people don't realise, if they say like it's a day's shoot, they mean a day. They mean 24 hours or probably longer. So, and this one was a couple of days, I think. I can't remember, but it was filmed in a disused building just next to Buckingham Palace, believe it or not, and it was being renovated or whatever, and we managed to get in there. So there was no heating or anything. I think it was filmed in January. No, it couldn't have been. It must have been filmed the year before. It must have been filmed this like December, November, the year before. It was freezing cold. The suit that I had to wear was incredibly uncomfortable because it was made out of this. It was just this calico suit with tape stuck all over it, with reflective tape. because they didn't have green screen in those days. And it kept falling to pieces. And the last bit I remember was filmed with the kind of observatory was filmed in Cambridge University Observatory, and that was like, that was kind of dusk the day after, and it was I just remember it being absolutely freezing cold and horribly uncomfortable, but fun.
Now, when a video becomes popular, do people start recognizing you? Because video was such a big medium then. I mean, when did you start getting recognized?
Damn quite quickly. I mean, more quickly than you'd imagine, because it wasn't just the video. I think, the UK is not a big place. And there were only 3 television stations at the time, I think. So, there might have been the 4th one by that time. But if you're on the BBC quite a lot, and I was on Top of the Pops and whatever, it's going to pretty much every household. It's not just going to a couple of million anymore. The viewing figures for these things were huge because nobody had internet or YouTube to look at. So yeah, I started getting recognised quite early on. In fact, it went from the January of 1984 to by the March, I probably couldn't leave my house without a disguise or a bodyguard. It was insane. It was absolutely insane.
That must be uncomfortable. You think about it. We take for granted just being able to walk out. Like I can just walk out and go to the supermarket. For you, does it affect you mentally? Because all of a sudden you're holed up. You're not the Nick going out to the pub and have a beer or whatever. Yeah. I mean, how did it affect you mentally?
It is quite bewildering. I mean, it's like I said, be careful what you wish for. I mean, it's exactly this is what I wanted. This is my dream. This is me living my dream. But yeah, you're not ready for the freedoms that you lose. It's quite astonishing. I mean, you might not sound a big thing going to the supermarket, but when you can't do it, it's a big thing. And you have to go. Someone has to go and get it for you. If you want a pint of milk, someone has to go and get that for you. And it's just life becomes really difficult. And also at the beginning, you don't have any money either. So it's like, what are the benefits to this? So I'm just getting stopped in the street. I'm getting jumped on. I'm getting me clothes ripped. I'm getting sort of physically assaulted. Which might sound fun, but I have to say it's quite terrifying. And I haven't even got a pot to piss in. Really, this is like, what are the benefits? But obviously they came later. There's when the royalties started coming in and whatever. So the rewards are huge, but you don't appreciate what you lose until it actually happens. And of course, you can't moan about it. I mean, you're living the life everybody's dreaming about. You start going up in there and saying, "Oh, my life's so miserable because I can't go to the shops." And I said, "Really?"
Yeah. So you mentioned Top of the Pops, and being, you're from England. You probably watched that your whole life. Yeah. What is it like? Tell me about how many times did you do it?
Oh, I don't know. Oh God. 20 or so times.
What was the first time like? Do they call you and say, "Hey, you're going to be on Top of the Pops," or does your manager go, "Hey"? I mean, tell me what went on, because it was such a huge show, and for artists, it must be full cycle. Like, oh my God, I'm on Top of the Pops.
Yeah, it was the one. It was incredibly powerful show. It was. If you didn't get Top of the Pops, you didn't get a hit, basically, or you might have got a minor hit, but you didn't get top 10 without some kind of help from Top of the Pops. So every I've forgotten when the chronology of it and when the chart was announced, but people used to get the midweek results and I think it was announced on a Tuesday for some reason, lunchtime on a Tuesday, I seem to remember, and Top of the Pops was on a Thursday, so you wouldn't know until the evening of the Monday, because the industry knew the chart by then, and then the people that work for the record company, we had independent TV pluggers. I think we employed. So we had basically people they're queuing up outside the offices of the BBC, Top of the Pops office, trying to sell you to Top of the Pops and say, look, he's gone up 3 places, he really should be on, and all this kind of stuff going on. And they either get you on Top of the Pops or they don't. So you'll get the phone call on the Tuesday morning, basically saying you're on Top of the Pops on Thursday. And was it live? It wasn't live when I first started doing it. It wasn't live, so it would have been recorded on the Wednesday, and then it would transmit on the Thursday.
Now, was it exciting when do you remember that first time when you went? I mean, you did it a bunch of times. Do you remember that first time where you're like, holy shit, I'm on Top of the Pops?
It was, but it's like everything else in this business. Everything looks more amazing than it actually is. It's like a mirage, really, because the closer you get to everything, the kind of it kind of disappears. I was like, where is? It's like, well, people say to you, "Oh, it must be really glamorous being doing that and going to film premieres and walking down red carpets and stuff like that." And when you get there, it's like, well, I'm getting out of a car and there's a carpet and there's that's it. There's nothing magical about it. So when you get to Top of the Pops for the first time, the first thing that hits you is how small the studio is, because it was in BBC Television Centre in Wood Lane when I started doing it, which is a tiny little studio with maybe, all these hundreds of people that you think are in the crowd. There's about 20, possibly, who all herded about in front of the cameras, and it's just a bit. And there's sort of like stages dotted about the studio, and it's all quite. It's exciting because that's what you're doing. It's just impossible to equate where you are to what you used to watching every Thursday night and on the TV. Because it's like, well, it's really weird. But yeah, it was. Of course, it was exciting. It was great. And I can't remember who was on when I did it. But then but all of a sudden you're mixing with the great and the good of the music business.
Now, after a bunch of times, does it lose that energy? Like, does it lose the excitement because you're like, oh, I'm doing Top of the Pops again? I mean, you said you did it a bunch of times. I mean, I could imagine it's like anything. The first 5 times, you're probably like, yeah. And then after a while, you're like, I've been here, done that. I mean, it must be a weird feeling.
Well, not really, because you're promoting a different song, and I did the first few on my own, which was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, and I'd have to say, when you look back, it looked pretty ridiculous because there's all this racket coming over, and just one geezer with a keyboard, and which is really silly because I'm a guitar player as well, so it was just very odd. So when I started doing it with the band, that was kind of a bit more fun and a bit more relaxed thing. But then it changed over the years. The Top of the Pops. Then it was live, so you'd have that little frisson of this is actually going out to the nation right now. You'd have that going on, which is quite exciting. I don't know. There was something different about everyone. You'd be on with different acts. You don't know who you're going to bump into. So no, it never got boring. I have to say that.
Now, you played Live Aid, and one of the regrets I have is I grew up, and I live now I moved back from the West Coast. Grew up 15 minutes from Philadelphia. I still regret I never went to see Live Aid. It was in Philly. It could be right across the bridge. You played it. I want to hear about your experience because I've talked to so many people who've played it, and they said it was magical. But how did you end up on Live Aid? Because you weren't on the record. No.
I wasn't, because I was kind of a new boy when Band Aid record came out, and I think the people on that record were basically the people in Midge or Bob's address books, because they literally got on the phone and started phoning people, and I wasn't part of that thing. So I got involved because I was doing a German TV festival, pop festival thing, and I was at Heathrow Airport, and there was a bunch of us doing this one show, And for some reason, Bob Geldof was there, just sort of loitering. And he just came up, he just walked up to me and said, "Do you want to do a gig? We're going to do a gig. You know about Band-Aid?" I said, "Yeah, of course I know about Band-Aid." So, "Well, we're going to do a gig. Do you fancy doing it?" I said, "Yeah, great." Okay, and it was going to be in the summer. So at that stage, it was going to be, I don't know, Hammersmith Odeon or the Apollo, whatever it's called now. And then it was, hang on, it's gonna have to be the arena, because it's quite Wembley Arena, because it's getting a bit bigger. And then it was, oh, hang on a minute, it's Wembley Stadium. And then it was 2 billion people on television. And then I just watched it from afar, getting crazier and crazier and bigger, and consequently getting more and more nervous as the day approached. But yeah, that's how I first got involved.
So the day comes. Take me back to that day, because it's funny. Kenny Jones said that he took like a limo and he took a helicopter, and then he went, and then he came back to his house because he met the Queen. Oh no, he met Lady Di, and then he came back, and he said it was just, and to me that's just like, he's just talking like that's all in a day. I'm like, oh, Rolls Royce to a helicopter. That's nothing I've ever done. But what was your day like when you did it? I mean, and just were you just? It must be, as an artist, it must have just been fascination, because there's so much talent.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I remember, what I genuinely remember, because you'll appreciate I get asked about it a lot. So I was, I'm not sure how much I've made up over the years. Or how much actually happened, but I'm pretty sure these things happened. Yes, I think a lot of us went by helicopter because they were panicking about getting the traffic that was going to be around Wembley Stadium, and getting people to the venue. So we flew a helicopter to a playing field that was quite close by. I just remember everybody getting off these helicopters, and there were like people playing football, going, "What's going on?" And then jumping in a limo to get to the conference centre, which is just adjacent to the stadium, where most of the dressing rooms were and stuff like that. And then being walked over to the stadium to meet Prince Charles, as he was, and Princess Diana, sitting in the royal box watching Status Quo kick it all off. And then me thinking, what's the protocol of leaving the royal box if the prince and the princess are still in the royal box? Do I have to curtsy and walk backwards? I don't know what the thing is. I think fortunately they left before I had to go, so that solved that problem. I remember hanging out backstage. There were like 3 porter cabins. You didn't have actual dressing rooms, but they were basically 3 porter cabins that was, people were getting in and out of. So I was there backstage, and I remember talking to Sting about, he just released the Dream of Blue Turtles album, and I'm talking to him about that album and how much I enjoyed the album, and he talked about how much fun it was to make it and stuff like this. At which point I must have been reasonably coherent, but I remember just being incredibly nervous from all day, but I must have had enough, I must have been able to string a sentence together at least. And then somehow we ended up on stage. And I just remember standing at the side of the stage, knowing that there was there's the circular stage, and there were 3 stages. One was the act on stage, one was breaking down the equipment, and one was setting up the equipment. And I knew this stage was supposed to revolve, and it did revolve, but it only revolved by dint of the fact that there were people pushing it around at the bottom, because it had broken down. So I knew there were things going wrong left, right and centre. And I hadn't seen my crew. I didn't know if my equipment was going to be on stage. I didn't know how much of it's going to be working. So you just walk on, and it's like, you just pray that it's going to work. And I don't know how my legs carried me on either. I don't remember the process of actually walking from the side of the stage out front to my microphone, because I must have just been in a kind of an altered state to get there, because I was literally terrified. And I remember playing and thinking, I can't hear anything. I can hear my vocal, and I hear a bit of guitar and a bit of drums. But okay, that's enough. I'm pretty sure I know where I am. That's fine. I remember the terrifying moment. I realised I didn't know the words to the second verse of "Wouldn't It Be Good," and they never came to me. So I repeated the first verse. I remember, hanging out backstage with various people. I remember Tony Hadley standing up in the Royal Box asking if anybody wanted a pint. Everybody stuck their hands out and says, "Oh no." So he goes off and comes back with trays of beers. It's like amazing. Remember watching Bowie and Queen. I remember watching Queen from the Royal Box and knowing then how special that I was a witness of something really special. Just that 20 minutes was quite extraordinary.
Now, I'm sorry. I was going to say, does an event like that jump your record sales? Do people see you and start buying more sales because because we saw it in the U.S. Everyone saw it. Did you notice an influx and like you're thinking, I'm going to get some nice royalties?
I didn't know. I mean, we all were kind of aware of the fact that it wasn't about us. I mean, it was impossible not to be in the moment and realize this was a big deal and people you were going to get noticed, if you weren't being noticed before. It was a great honor and a great privilege to be in that kind of company. And there was a point at which Bowie came off stage early to show the original. There was a Michael Burke documentary about Ethiopia that started the whole process for Bob Geldof, and they remember them showing that and the whole crowd going quiet, and at that point everybody realizing, we're having a really good time, but this is why we're here. So there was all that going on as well. I wasn't aware of, I don't know, there might have been statisticians out there that can tell you whether the sales went up or anything. I don't think that was particularly in anybody's mind. One thing that did, I know it did bring me to the attention of Miles Davis. That's all I do know, because I got contacted by him afterwards, because of that. I mean, and that's enough for me, So Miles Davis, I was on Miles Davis's radar. That's pretty insane. But
did he call you?
Well, it was weird because I was recording a video for Don Quixote in Spain, and we got back to the hotel and there was a message saying, "Can you call Miles Davis?" and with a number. And I'm like, yeah, right. Good try. so I didn't bother with it. And then we were playing with Paul Young at the Pier in New York, and I come off stage. And there's Miles Davis standing at the side of the stage, and we have a chat, and what little I did understand, I have to be honest. I got a good, I found out that he liked my shit, which was nice. And at that point, he wanted me to write some stuff for him, and it's like, wow, really? This is insane. But unfortunately, I think he died a couple of years after that. He wasn't, but apparently when he died, his band were routining a version of Don Quixote because he loved that song, and that's the one I played it on Live Aid. He kind of got him into it.
Now, he said he wanted you to write for him. You've written for a lot of other artists. How does that come about? How do people, I know we work with Elton John, which must be amazing, but do people just sit there and go, hey, do people like your stuff and then they call you? How does someone get, say, recruited? Because that's what it is. Or they're saying, come write with us. How did you slip into that part of your career?
Well, I didn't know how it worked either. So it was all a bit of an adventure for me. And initially, I just wrote songs and put them on my shelf and took them to my publisher, and people walked along and said, "I'll have that one," which is what happened with the one and only and Chesney Hawks, because that was already written. But that doesn't happen very often. So often, I think it was Yeah, you might get a call. Or your publisher might get a call. Your publisher would be aware of who's looking for songs, and they might contact you saying so and so's looking. Have you got anything? And then you say yes or no, or I can write something, or something like that. You might even, or so and so has got an album coming out. He wants to do some co-writing. Do you want to write with him? And I'll do that. I wrote with quite a few up and coming artists, and with songs that never saw the light of day, which is you on a couple of occasions I recorded whole albums with people, and then there was a change in hierarchy at the record company, and the artist got dropped and the project got shelved, and which is why I've been releasing EPs called Songs from the Shelf. These are just songs that have just been sitting on my shelf that I thought, well, might as well bring them out in public. So there's loads of ways, but it was always a struggle, and it's always quite political to get in, onto a project, and there was a lot of, because there's a lot of chat and nothing ever happens afterwards. So it's just I don't have meetings anymore. And ultimately it proved to be quite a frustrating experience, in that you never get to see a project all the way through to its conclusion. And I had ideas that coming again that were just kind of, well, nobody's going to sing that. That's just too me, So I either I might put it on a shelf and then, or record it just to get it out of the way. And then I found that I had like 10 tracks, or maybe I should do an album. I don't know. And that's what happened in 1999 when I brought out 15 Minutes.
Now, when you write for someone else, when you write for you, you're writing for you. When you write for someone else, do you have to put yourself sort of in a different time frame? Because I've written comedy for people before, and you got to think of their character. Like, I wouldn't say this, but they would say this. And I had a friend who wrote for kids shows in L.A., and he doesn't have kids. So I'm like, that's really smart. He can write that. So, but how for you, when you write for someone else, do you listen to them, and do you sit there and go, I wouldn't record this, but they would? I always wonder, because it's like, if you write a gem, you probably want to keep it.
Well, that's that's the issue. That's why I stopped doing it, because I found myself, sort of few years in, I found myself having a great, the session's not going very well. You're sitting there, you're staring at someone else across the room with an acoustic guitar, and nothing's happening. And then you have a brilliant idea, and you think, shall I share this with the room, or shall I keep this to myself? And I ended up keeping them to myself. So I thought, well, this is not the right job for you, Nick. You're going to have to stop doing this. But early on, I did struggle with the whole writing for other people, because my first few demos, I'd taken to my publisher, and they'd go, yeah, it's really good, but it sounds like Nik Kershaw. So like, oh, great, okay. It's kind of going to, but all right, okay, I see what you mean. But it wasn't just because I was singing it. It was because singing the demos. It's just because the way the chords were going and the way the tune. So I had to, I did spend a lot of time listening to pop music, because I didn't really write pop music. I got kind of lucky with a few songs, but sort of generic, the kind of music that was getting covered all the time, and when you could deliver to artists, in some ways had to be quite generic, and was singing about something, something anybody can sing. Because if you're restricting it to a certain subject, then who's going to sing it? It's just, and I found that difficult as well. So ultimately, it turned out not to be the right career move, I don't think. Although I had a bit of luck down the road.
Now, for you now, you're writing. How have you evolved? Because, once again, you're not Nik Kershaw on Top of the Pops, a young guy on the video with the crazy suit. You're a grown man. You've lived through life. We all mature. Has your writing changed a lot? Are you more introspective now? Do you feel you have something more to say? How's it changed for you?
Yes, it has changed. It's changed. It's gone through various changes over the years. I mean, there was lyrically, it's definitely changed. I spent most of the 80s trying not to write about anything that I actually cared about, or anything that would give me away, because I kind of had imposter syndrome, and I figured that if I wrote about myself, people would think, would find me out. I'd be, I got you. So I wrote about, I don't know, Darwin, or saving Wales, or the City of Angels, Los Angeles, or I just wrote about stuff that wasn't about, it wasn't about love, it wasn't about sex, it was about, so it was a bit of a strain. I ended up looking through newspapers for things to write about, which is nuts, and then sort of. Then I tried to write a pop lyric. When I started writing for other people, I started trying to write pop lyrics and trying to figure out what they were. And then it suddenly occurred to me the easiest possible thing to write about is what you know, and how you feel, and what you're going through, or what you've been through, or what a friend's been through, or so it just became a lot easier. So from the sort of end of the 90s onwards, the songs have been much more personal and much, I guess, when you get more confidence about yourself, you can do that because you're not so worried about getting found out. So yeah, the lyrics have got more introspective, more personal, and I think more humorous as well. I do like to slip a bit of humour in there, because life is ridiculous most of the time, and I like to stick the absurd in there. Musically, yeah, I guess I've changed. I go in and out of things. I became aware I was getting quite known for being a smart ass with chords, and the way my melodies went over, changed, and the way my chords modulated, and the way I changed key and all that kind of stuff. And there was a period when I was writing that I was just doing that just to show off, just to be a smart ass, and to the detriment of the music. And then I went through a period of just writing songs on a guitar. And guitar songs are different, because your fingers go in certain places, and a song that's easy to play on the guitar is a completely different kind of song. And they were much simpler, and I did a couple of albums like that. And now every time I write a song, I don't know how to write a song. I don't know how you do it. It sounds ridiculous, but they all happen in a different way. So I just let them happen. They either come to me or they don't. And usually the refinement of the song is just a process of just mucking about, and just in my potting shed here, in my studio, But I've acquired techniques over the years for writing lyrics and stuff that I'll always write a really quick lyric just to kind of get the bones of the song together. So it's a skeleton. So it's just got the rhyming scheme, it's got the meter, and it's in the rhythm of the words, and it's just, this is how the words sit in the song, and then I'll tweak it and tweak it and tweak it until it's something that makes sense. And it's sometimes quite amazing how little you have to do before it actually does start making sense.
Now, you said you're recording in your home, but you recorded at Abbey Road Studios. What was that like?
I've recorded at Abbey Road a few times over the years. It's a special place. It really is. It just kind of, the Beatles are coming out, just seeping out of the walls. It's got such a lot of history there. And you'd walk down a corridor and you'd bump into this sort of lump of metal with big sort of faders on it. You think, well, what's that? I said, oh, that's Sgt. Pepper was recorded on that. Oh, okay. It's just lying in the corridor. And it's a place where everybody in there knows what they're doing, which is kind of, you're going to get good results. If you don't get good results in Abbey Road Studio, then you shouldn't have been going in there in the first place, really.
Now, you have the tour coming up later this year, no glitz, just the hits, other bits. How do you formulate that? What are you going to play on that tour? And how's that different from, you said it's different from the tour through Germany, or are you doing that tour in Germany too?
It'll be similar. It won't, yeah, I might tweak it a bit for the UK, but I mean, the thing is, I play lots of festivals, and a few one-off shows and stuff. I haven't done a tour with my band, certainly not in the UK, for about 11 years. So it's quite and what's great to doing it in front of your own crowd is that you can take a few risks, and you can play a few more obscure tunes and just play things that you haven't played before. But I've got to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know, because I haven't figured it out yet. But there will be hits, because I like playing them now. I didn't used to, but I do now. We enjoy playing the hits, and you just enjoy sharing them with an audience. It's just a great thing. But there will be songs from the last 40 years, and some of which I've never played live.
Now, how does that make you feel? I mean, you said it's great, but you sit there and I made out to your songs, and now I'm a married man. You've touched. I mean, there's probably people who have conceived to one of your albums, and then their kid shows up, and then their kid's grandkid shows up. I mean, as an artist, that must be such a great feeling, because the '80s, to people my age, that's what we live for, man. But the '80s have made a huge comeback. I'm on Facebook. There's like 35-year-old girls I know who listen to my show. They love the '80s. I mean, as an artist, did you think that the music would stay this long? I mean, just would still be touching people? I mean, of course, you wanted to do that. You wrote it, but did you think it would still be this? Now there's this whole new wave coming of new wave.
No, I didn't. No, not really. I didn't expect to be touring and playing festivals and those songs at the age of 65. No, that didn't occur to me. And I don't really understand it. I do get asked quite often why the 80s were so popular. I don't know. I think because you could always find something for you in the 80s. There was, because the genres were all over the place. There's no kind of one 80s genre. It could have been big hair rock, it could have been ska, it could have been blues, it could have been R&B, it could have been anything. There was so many different kinds of music that you just switch one radio station on and you'd hear everything. There'd be something for everybody there. So maybe that's one of the reasons. But I don't know. It was kind of at the end of it. Sort of, it was a dying age, really, because it was an age where people really, really completely immersed themselves in the music and the act and the album and the lyrics and everything, and they got really involved in it. Whereas now it seems to be, I don't know if this is unfair, but it seems to be kind of background music, or it just seems to be something to do something else to. It's something to do your homework to. It's something to play video games to. It's something to it's just an accompaniment to life rather than life itself, So, but I have no actual answers as to why it's still so popular. It's like looking a gift horse in the mouth, really. I'm just very grateful for it.
I have two more questions. One, what would you say is the highlight of your career? I mean, if you could break it down and say this was, it doesn't get better than this. What was the highlight of your career? Wow,
I don't know. That's pretty tricky. There's been so many. I don't know if there's just one. And also that there's the feeling that I'd like to think it hasn't happened yet. That's always possible. There's a phone call that's going to just come in a few days' time. That's going to go, "Hey Nick, do you fancy doing this?" And then, what? Amazing. But I know. I mean, God, sitting in a studio recording with Elton John, that was just insane. That's got to be a highlight.
How did you meet him? I mean, how did that come about?
I met him because I was doing a show at Wembley Stadium in '84 called The Summer of '84, and he was headlining it. And he always takes. even now, he's incredibly interested and engaged with new artists, and he loves being involved with new artists, and I really admire that in him. But he was playing in Paris, and I was doing some promo over there, and he found out that I was there and invited me to a gig. And we went to the gig and hung out a bit, and then I just various things. I kind of went over for lunch a few times and just hung out with him, and he was just brilliant to me. He was just such a support and a champion for me, and really encouraging, and really sweet to me. And I kind of and we bumped into each other all the time, and for some reason we just bumped into each other all the time. I remember bumping into him in Tower Records in LA. Just kind of, he was buying some records, and I'm, Elton, hello mate. So then that was a really short period of time. That was kind of from about 84 to about 89 maybe. I toured with him in 89. I did his European tour with him, and then didn't really see him again until we did the Duets album in 90. And the last time I saw him was 2005, I think, when he got married to David first time.
And final question. Earlier you said you were going to tell a story possibly about why you went longer in the studio during the recording of your first album. And you said you get to that, and now I want to know because it piqued interest in me.
It's not that. There's nothing salacious or anything going on. It was so I'm doing top of the. I've done my first album. My first album's out. I'm in the process of recording my second album, but I'm still promoting the first one, and I'm at Top of the Pops. I can't remember what song I'm doing at the Top of the Pops, but I'm sitting there in rehearsals, and I get a tap on my shoulder, and it's Mark King from Level 42, and he's saying, "Hello, mate," and we hadn't met, and I was a big fan. I used to go and watch him back in little clubs when they were started out in sort of 1981, 1982. So we got chatting, and he said, "What are you doing now? Are you recording?" I said, "Yeah, I'm recording. I'm recording a new album." He said, "Got anything I can play on?" So I thought, wow, blimey. And I'd done all the bass already. So I thought, well, there isn't anything that I can hear. So I wrote a song for him. I wrote a song called Easy on the second album. But the only time we could get him into the studio was about 9 o'clock at night. By which time, Peter Collins would have given up. By 7:30, he starts looking at his watch, and then it's time to go home. So this is a big deal for. And Peter didn't really know Level 42, and said, "Is it really? Are we going to stay for 9 o'clock?" And what? Yeah, really. So he came and his one stipulation. I said, "Can we get you anything? Do you want anything?" He said, "Just a nice bottle of red wine." Blah blah blah. So we had a couple of bottles of red wine, and we played for about 3 or 4 hours, by which time Peter Collins was like unconscious in a chair in the back of the studio. But he did it, and it was a great. You talk about highlights of my career. That's another one. That was such a great night, and just sitting there listening to Mark King play his bass and it's playing with him, playing the rhythm track with him, and then we'd finish it, and you'd go, wow. And you say, and then he'd say, "Do you want me to overdub it?" And right, really? Yeah. So he double tracked the whole thing. It's like note for note, amazing.
Well, that's awesome, man. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And people, just so you know, more on me. Got on early, thinking I've forgotten about the time difference, the daylight savings time. But Nick jumped on earlier. Then it was great. So anyway, so people go see his website. It's Nik Kershaw. And it's .net. You're a .net guy. My website's .net too, because someone took .com. I'm like, so anything else? What else is going on? You got the tour coming up, and you working on anything new?
Yeah, I've got Songs from the Shelf Part 2 coming out in a few weeks' time, and it's just festivals, and I've got to get stuck into the next album. Really, I need to do something new Don't know what it's going to be, but it will come to me.
That's awesome. So people, go check out Nick. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 950 episodes there. Email me, cooper@coopertalk.net. Twitter, that's at CooperTalk. Instagram, it's at CooperTalk1. Don't forget, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.